All right. Good evening, Howard County Democratic Central Committee. Welcome to our monthly scheduled Howard County Democratic Central Committee meeting. We are delighted today with our fourth episode of our Howard County Meet the Governor candidate series. Absolutely delighted to have former CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation, Mr. Wes Moore here, one of the leading figures in helping fighting poverty on quite a large level. We appreciate you being here, sir. We also appreciate you being a sponsor for our upcoming picnic. So we look forward to seeing you on Monday. So thank you for that as well. And so folks, everyone on the call, the format's the same. We're going to offer Mr. Wes Moore about 10 minutes or so to offer sort of his vision for Maryland and all the exciting things that he's working on with his campaign for governor. After that, we'll offer the Central Committee about 5 minutes or so for a Q&A to ask a few questions, and then we'll wrap up the interview from there. So with that said, I'd like to please welcome Mr. Wes Moore.
Thank you so much, Sean. Hey, everybody. It's great to see you all and to the entire Central Committee and for your leadership and for organizing this and for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I mean, to be with literally some of the top grassroots leaders in all Howard County, and it's exciting for me to be here because it goes without saying that Howard County is going to be incredibly important, and not just to this race, not just because of the fact that no governor has won without winning Howard County. You all are a true bellwether, but importantly, it's also because of what you epitomize and what progress in this state can actually look like. I'm inspired by the leadership that we've seen of your county executive and who's shown, remarkable leadership in really complicated and challenging times. Maybe it's some of the hardest times to be a chief executive in this state. Whether it's the leadership that you all have shown in Annapolis, and I look at, what Delegate Atterbury put together and helped to lead on when it came to the issues of policing reform, or how, Guy Gazzoni is focused not just on, progressive issues throughout his career, but also just creating a leadership bench. This county is important. And it's also important because when you look at the leadership of Howard County, it looks like the county. And that is one of my pledges, in that the leadership in our state government, that from agency heads to cabinet secretaries, it will look like the state. This state, it's my birth state. It's where I came of age. It's where I have some of my most beautiful and some of my most traumatic memories. It's a place where I built my career. It's a place where I fell in love. It's a place where we're raising our children. It's also a state that is incredibly representative of our large society's joys and its sorrows. It's societal opportunities and its inequities, and where we can literally have some of the best schools in the country that exist right here in this state, and also some of the most underperforming ones that are right next to each other, where we can have some of the world's best hospitals where people come from around the world to come get treatments, and people here in this state cannot afford to get treated in them, where the leading cause of bankruptcy in our state is getting sick. Our state really has to be one where we can look at everything through an equity lens, and one that we just don't leave people behind, because we don't have to. I know what it means to work for the good of the public. I know what it takes to lead large organizations and to create transformative change as a chief executive. I've had the chance to lead soldiers in combat. I've had the chance to lead a successful small business with a core focus on helping first generation and first and family students make it to and through college. And for the past 4.5 years, as Jahan indicated, I've been the CEO of one of the largest nonprofit organizations in this country, where we allocated close to $750 million towards housing and transportation and food and criminal justice reform and early childhood. Everywhere where poverty was either the cause or the consequence, we would find, we would fund, we would build. And in these past years, we've had to meet a very real human need as it showed itself. Where in just the past year, we allocated over $80 million in relief funds alone, and that just went towards emergency food and emergency cash assistance and educational supports. But while we saw the power of philanthropy firsthand, it also reminded me every single day of the need of it. it reminded me that this year that good deeds alone will never lead us out of darkness. And that if we're not fixing the systems that cause things like what we saw in the state of Maryland, like 11 years of job growth to go away in 11 weeks, where we saw a third of all children in the state who were living with someone who was dealing with either mental illness or substance abuse. And in the counties where that is most pronounced, it is counties like Dorchester and Kent, where we saw 24% of all jobs that were lost due to COVID-19 were jobs of people who were living in poverty before COVID-19, i.e. the working poor. You know, I've seen how economic inequality, how it shows itself in my own family. I saw how my father died in front of me when I was 4 years old. I saw how my mother became a single mother with 3 children she was going to raise on her own, and how she didn't get her first job that gave her benefits until I was 14 years old. How these singular shocks can change the course of an entire family's trajectory. Where I felt handcuffs my wrists for the first time when I was 11 years old. Ended up growing up in communities that were over-policed and under-resourced. But the fact is that I ended up with people who were able to see something in me before I saw it in myself. And so in this extraordinary time, as a state, as an administration, we have to be data-driven and heart-led. We have to create and actualize a bold future-facing agenda that is going to focus on work and wages and wealth. That is our North Star. And that means all those means have to get us to the ends of work, wages, and wealth. That means we have to implement and operationalize the blueprint, which I was proud to work on, the blueprint for Maryland's future, and invest in early childhood, making universal pre-K real. Hire teachers who represent our community and support them through increased salaries and trainings and advancement opportunities. Coming up with equitable funding for education and prevent overcrowding, like what you all have within Howard County and the issues that you're fighting on within Howard County. That means when we're talking about work, we're going to focus on transportation and infrastructure. That includes broadband development, because broadband development is not just about can kids log on when we have these crises that show themselves, but also broadband access is about how everyone applies for jobs, how people can get their benefits. It's ensuring that housing is a human right. Work, wages, and wealth means we're going to focus on energy and an environment with solar and wind investments, renewable energy that can drive clean jobs into the future, and integrating how we think about public health and public safety. When we talk about wages, it means fair wages that actually honors work, and knowing that a deadline of 2025 for Maryland to institute a $15 minimum wage is just not fast enough and will not stand in our administration. And also that we need to understand how that's going to be baked and also correlated to inflation and other economic factors, which the current policy does not do. And when we talk about wealth, it means demanding a government that actually urges economic fairness in the way we think about reducing the wealth gap, focusing on procurement reform, and having a true state commitment to actually ending child poverty. So I just want to close this part with an emphasis that our state has some of the greatest natural resources and human talents that we could ever ask for. But we as a state, we are very asset rich and we are strategy poor. And we have a unique moment right now where we have a brand new balance sheet due to ARPA to make generational changes and to make generational challenges history, where we don't have to be bound by old rhetoric or old arguments or decades-long unfulfilled promises. Where I know that this field is crowded, but I also feel like we have a unique lane, we have a unique vision, we have a unique set of experiences, and with your help, we're going to win in June. We're going to win in November. And more importantly, we are going to spend the next decade actually creating the kind of transformative change that we not only need in this state, but that for many of you, you've been fighting for a very long time. And I want to let you know that in me, not only will you have a partner in Annapolis, but you'll have someone who's going to be proud to have you at the table in every single conversation. So I'm thankful for the chance to be with you today. I'm thankful for the chance to spend some time with you. And I'm looking forward to spending a whole lot more time with you, but maybe next time in 3D. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. We sincerely appreciate that. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. And let's see who we have in the queue.
I think I kept it at 9 minutes too.
Excellent job. We do appreciate that. All right. So I have Jessica and Tim lined up so far. So Jessica, Ms. Nichols, go ahead, please.
I'm Jessica Nichols. I'm a proud Howard County public school educator, and I'm super excited to speak with you this evening. I have a question, and my question is this. As we all well know, unfortunately in Maryland, the quality of your education is very much dependent on the zip code in which you are privileged enough to go to school in. And so my question is, what are you going to do to ensure equity so that our Maryland students don't have to worry about what zip code they're in order to get the same high quality, amazing education?
Amen. Amen. Where luck should not have to be a prerequisite to be able to get what you need in order to have a prosperous life. That's exactly right. I think about the work that we were able to do with the blueprint, and I was proud to fight and work with the blueprint, not only from the earliest stages, but also then having to work for a completely unnecessary, but necessary because that's what we had to deal with, was the veto override in order to actually make that happen and how to operationalize it. And the blueprint actually does, it addresses equity, and I fought for those elements of it that were in there. But now it will be my job to ensure that the State Board of Education enforces it. Because with an investment in that equity, the blueprint will help communities that have long suffered from underinvestment and systemic racism by promising more equitable funding. And that includes for students who receive special education services, ELLs, students, English language learners, and also the schools in higher poverty neighborhoods and higher poverty communities. The idea that the blueprint will actually convert nearly 1/3 of all Maryland schools into community schools, where you can have school-based coordinator that will actually help to determine a school's specific needs, and how we think about academic and language supports, nutrition, dental, a collection of other items, because we understand that education will never simply be about the curriculum. And when you consider the fact that exactly the students who you were just speaking about, that 45% of students in this state live in poverty. Students. And so the community school expansion, which is going to be one of the largest in the country, that is going to make a huge difference for students and families in every corner of the state. There also are other things that we have to be able to do when it comes to addressing equity within the educational framework that exist well before the educational framework begins as well. And that is about what are the things we're doing to actually support families, where if you look at some of the leading indicators why a student is not performing where they need to be by third grade reading levels, right? There's generally 3 leading indicators that show themselves. One is chronic absence. So for students who are missing 30% or more of the school year for a whole collection of different reasons, which you have to address. The second is summer learning loss. And we have a whole another collection of issues because that summer learning loss now turns into COVID learning loss. And the fact that we were so flat-footed and unprepared for that as a large society, and we did not prepare our teachers, we did not arm our instructors for what was going to happen along those lines, and we still haven't. But the third piece, to the great point you made earlier, Jessica, it's students who are entering school unprepared. It's students who are entering school without knowing a lot of the basics. So letters, numbers, colors. So when you walk into a classroom, you talk to teachers and say, what's the one thing that you can give them? Is it more time? Is it more resources? Is it this or that? Oftentimes the answer is, I just want a classroom of students ready to go. Because if I teach too slow, I will lose, I'll bore the kids that are ready. If I teach too fast, I will lose the students that are not, right? So I think it's how are we thinking holistically about the educational assets that's putting equity at that forefront. And so it is going to be about the implementation of many of the blueprint assets and many of the blueprint elements And in addition to that, it's coming up with a holistic framework about how we talk about and how we address education within our society and what the long-term goals end up being.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for the question. I'd like to move on to Central Committee member, Mr. Tim Latimer. Mr. Latimer, please go ahead.
Thanks, Shahan, and thank you, Mr. Moore, for your service, and thank you for joining us this evening and sharing with us your outlook and the compelling vision that you've offered. I was really gratified to hear you mention investing in wind and solar power, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about how you see Maryland as a climate leader, and in particular also bringing in that lens of equity, recognizing that climate justice is a huge part of the equation here, and that with the climate crisis, it's exacerbating the very inequities that we see across so many fronts in our society. So I was wondering if you could also speak to how we can make Maryland more resilient to the impacts of climate change as well.
Yeah. No, thank you, Tim. And not only great questions, but I'm glad you framed it the way that you framed it, which is climate justice, because oftentimes people do not refer to it as that. It is climate justice. It's understanding the fact that the measures of inequity that show themselves, they also show themselves in climate. They also show themselves with the environment. And it, these are not things that people say, well, you can look at it in housing or education, and they completely oftentimes forget about the environment and climate. There's measures of significant inequity in the way this is actually impacting our communities right now. And if you look at where the state is right now, Maryland has mandated that half of our energy supply come from renewable sources by 2030. But as of 2019, our state was only producing about 11% of that renewable energy. Half of that came from hydroelectric. The rest was imported. And so that costs the consumers. And people don't understand how those costs end up getting passed down on the consumers. It's not just that we need to hit the mandate, but we want to make sure that renewable energy has to come from Maryland and does not have to be imported. This goes back to what we're talking about when it comes to our jobs, right? When it comes to work and wages and wealth, how can we do this in a way that's actually both going to be beneficial for the state environmentally, but then also is something that can be beneficial for the state economically? Right now we have mandates as to how long it's going to take for our state to be able to have have an electric vehicle fleet, and the fact that once again we continue pushing this date off to a time that is not just in many ways irrelevant because we're watching other states completely pass us by, but in a way that the technology doesn't even reinforce that it should take that long. So as a state, the best way to be able to address that is to think boldly. The best way as a state, is to reduce our carbon emissions to fend off climate change, while also ensuring that economic growth to promote these investments in green technology actually can happen. We've seen leadership show itself in Annapolis on this. If you look at, I think it's SB, I think it's 460 from the last session that came in, I believe it's 460 that came in the last session on this issue. The problem is that we have not had anyone on the second floor in Annapolis who's actually decided to make this a priority. That's something that we are going to do, because as we're thinking about this, and we're thinking about the fact that we have legislators who are prioritizing this, we just need for them to know that from the governor's office, that there is going to be not just a partner in this, but someone who's going to push the agenda and put real dollars behind making Maryland a leader in these issues.
Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Tim. Well, looks like we do have one more question. Typically this is reserved for Central Committee members, but because our intern, Mr. Ethan Dixon, has been working so hard, we'll go ahead and let him tee up the question. Mr. Dixon, go ahead.
I snuck in here. Thank you. Well, I wanted to thank you for coming to talk to us.
Bless you, Ethan.
And I had a question regarding mental health resources in schools. So I personally know a lot of former Maryland students and now college students that, struggle with mental health issues and pushed for more resources in schools. And I was wondering if you had a plan regarding mental health resources and for young adults in the school system.
Yeah. I think about, we actually just had had an event yesterday looking at the role of trauma on students, and how Baltimore City was actually the first city in the country to be able to push forward a trauma-informed lens in the way that all city agencies work. And it really happened. It was spurned from a shooting that happened after a school in a elementary and middle school in Baltimore called Hollowbird, where you had 38 bullets that were laid out, 4 people shot, and kids were ducking for safety. And the next day, the kids just went to school as if nothing happened. Where we're now coming off of a pandemic, where we have now seen that we've had 10,000 Marylanders lose their life due to COVID. As I mentioned before, if you look at places like Kent County, where over 40% of children who are growing up with someone with with either mental health or substance abuse, where in Baltimore City, over half of children are growing up with someone inside the home who has been involved in the criminal justice system. We can't pretend like trauma and mental health issues are not something that is a statewide epidemic that our state is dealing with. It is not an urban issue. It is not a rural issue. It is not a suburban issue. It is something that this entire state is wrestling with. And so when we're talking about this, what it means for students, we can't, a good day for students is when the top thing on their mind is how they're going to do in their biology test. The problem is we know that's not the case for many students inside of our school system. That's the 8th thing on their mind on that day. And so what that means from a statewide level, it means that we have to be able to provide a continuum of school, mental, and behavioral health services, and that's going to be critical to actually effectively addressing the breadth of the students' needs. It means ensuring that we have school psychologists that are part of a team of school-employed mental health professionals. We have schools within the state right now that have more SROs and more security officers than we do mental health professionals. And it's a core thing to understand that, that people, when people say that they're products of their expectations, part of the expectations means what type of environments are we asking people to exist in? And so from a statewide perspective, from the influence from the second floor in Annapolis, from the influence from the chief executive of the state, for how that's going to be brought about to localized school boards and local leaders, where they have much of the jurisdictional authority. But they also know that just because the governor doesn't have the jurisdictional authority to be able to place on things like curriculum, that doesn't mean an absolvement of responsibilities. That people need to know that this is a priority for the governor, and that our administration, about being able to make sure that the resources are available, to make sure that mental health services are provided, to make sure that, in the same way, frankly, I think about it honestly, Ethan, in the military, where, the military, and it took a while, but the military got much smarter about the way they thought about mental health. And it took a while to get there. I'm not going to filibuster, but I can, offline, I can tell you stories about how they used to deal with mental health in the military. And it's gotten better. But part of the reason is because we finally had leadership that insisted on it. And that's exactly what we plan on. That's exactly what we'll do from the State House.
Thank you for that. We do need to cut it, but I see Ms. May has a question. So Ms. May, Beal, if we can just please keep it brief. We do want to be fair to the other candidates.
Okay.
Before.
And I'll keep my answer brief. I'm sorry. This on me. I'm sorry, Sean.
Okay, that's okay. Appreciate the
Okay.
session, sir. We just
Okay.
wanted to get it all.
Again,
Bye, Ms. May.
hey, how you doing?
I'm
Again,
blessed.
welcome, and thanks so much for sharing with us your plans to ensure your administration is going to reflect the people you serve.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
And so my question is, what are your plans to ensure our seniors are not forgotten and continue to live the life they have always known?
God bless you for that. I think we have to be able to address that from a holistic perspective. And that means from a societal and a social perspective, from a financial perspective. And also it goes back to who is going to be at the table. And so I'll be very brief, but I'll tell you what I mean. Forbes magazine just actually released a report indicating the best and the worst places in the country to retire. The state of Maryland was the worst. literally was number 50 in terms of where people retire. And oftentimes people will say, well, is that just about tax policy and so on and so forth? It's much bigger than that. It's also about the fact that do you live in a place and do you live in a space and do you live in an environment that actually has access to transit? Do you live in a place, in a space in society where people feel safe to be able to move around and to go to dinner, and a place where when their families can visit, and that their families and their children, their grandchildren actually want to live? Is a place where we are going to prioritize health and health supports. And so when you're looking at the whole variety of spectrum of issues, you realize the reasons why Maryland continues to fall behind, particularly when it comes to places to retire and ways that we're supporting our seniors. My mom and my grandmother right now lives in Anne Arundel County. She's 94 years old. And I think, yeah, God bless her. And I think about what that means in terms of how we want to create a place and a space where it's not just that that we can create an environment that honors her, but a place and a space that honors the type of community that she wants her children and her grandchildren and now her great-grandchildren to actually exist in. And so part of it means we need to make sure that seniors are very much at the table when it comes to these decisions and what's being made. And that's a commitment that I know I'm making to you, Ms. May, and to each and every Marylander, that there will be a very core and a specific place at my table when it comes to addressing these issues. But what it also means is there's not going to be a singular solution when it comes to addressing things that make Maryland a better place for people to want to retire and stay and feel supported. That it's going to be about economics, it's going to be about safety, it's going to be about transportation, it's going to be about housing, it's going to be about health, it's going to be about the whole person, because that's what our seniors deserve.
Thank you so much. Oh, I just feel excited.
God bless you. So do I.
All right, so that concludes our interview. Thank you so much, Mr. Wes Moore, for joining us, spending time with the Central Committee. We do appreciate that. Any departing words?
Only departing words. I just want to say a huge and heartfelt thank you, not just for tonight, but for everything you continue to do to make our state so beautiful. And I'm asking for your help. I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for you to go out there and go out and tell 5 people tonight about what you heard. And I'm also asking and I'm also saying that if we do this, and if we do this together, we are going to win. We'll win in June. We'll win in November. And then we're going to set the state for the next decade to be a place where generations will talk about the work that we got done over these next 10 years. So bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wes Moore. We appreciate that. This concludes episode 4 of our Meet the Governor candidate series. Thank you.